Welcome back, everybody. We are doing another fun episode of Indie Reads Aloud. I love this program. As you all know, I'm a recovering 6-year-old, so reading out loud is one of my favorite things in the world. And I'm glad that you're here to share this time with me. Today, we have Barbara Evers joining us from a very dark corner in South Carolina. And she's super fun because she writes about giraffes, and I'm super excited. Thank you very much, Barbara, for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to do this.
Yes, it. I always have a good time because it means people read out loud to me, and that's my happy place. And I love that you write about giraffes. I think that's really
Yes.
super cool. And the way you do it is you intertwine giraffes and mysticism. So tell me a little bit about the backstory of what this trilogy is all about.
The backstory, uh, you have these people called the gifted ones that happened hundreds of years before when this story occurs. I actually have a short story called The Gifted Ones that I occasionally do in Book Funnel as a freebie. But the idea was they were protecting their land, and the creator gifted some of the villagers with particular sensory gifts, and the watchers were gifted with the gift of sight. And that gift of sight gave them incredible aim beyond anything anybody else could do. And so they're really good archers. It also gifted them with prophecy, the ability to read body language really well. And in fact, so much so that watchers tend to be somewhat stoic because they're aware that the other watchers can read everybody. So they've learned to kind of do the poker face thing. They're
I
also,
love that this is all describing giraffes really, really well.
well, and that's the thing, because the giraffe is
Yeah,
very much like that. A giraffe, people don't realize giraffes have keen eyesight. And so you have in the story the royal family, due to, and I won't go into the whole history of it, but there's agreement between the giraffes and the royal family, and they kind of agree to work with each other. And so each member of the royal family is telepathically bonded to a particular giraffe. Each one has their own. So we have Adana, who is our warrior princess, and her giraffe is Ambrosia. And so this is a visual telepathic bond. So it's not a word. It's not like they talk to each other. It's all visual. But in a battle, being bonded telepathically to a giraffe can be quite beneficial because one, they're taller, so
sure.
they can see a whole lot more. They can see further. And I'm not going to read this section in the book, but she discovers early in the first book that they can actually throw their vision to other giraffes and her vision can go with it, which is something people didn't know until it happens in the first book. So and I'm not giving away a big
That's so
spoiler there because
cool.
that's
That
like in the
is
first
so
chapter.
cool.
So it aids them quite a bit. And watchers are all female, whereas some of the other gifted ones, which the gifted ones surface more in the second book, The Watchers in Exile, which is the one right above my head up there. But there
Hmm.
are others, and they're all based on um, learning styles, actually. I am a corporate trainer, so I know a lot about adult learning styles. And so I took the
Okay.
visual learning style and took the watchers and created them. But there's also the auditory learning style, and I created listeners for that. And there is the kinesthetic learning style, which is the people who learn more by feeling and touch and doing. And I created
Sure.
the empaths for that. And then because you got to have four, I created another one called seers. But we don't see them until the second book for the most part. I think we get some mention of them in the first book. I'm trying to remember, and it all runs together sometimes.
Sure.
But,
Yeah.
I took that, and the irony of this is I created an entire world where watchers are the powerful warriors that protect the kingdom, and I am blind as a bat. So,
That's okay. I totally understand how you could go that way because my series of children's books focuses on how individuals hear or listen, and I'm deaf in my left ear. So I
okay.
really wanted to kind of focus. So I totally get that you might want to go in that. that perceptional direction,
The funny
because
thing is,
it's
it didn't
different in
even,
your world.
yeah, it didn't even dawn on me that I had done that and the irony of it until I was telling my eye doctor about these movies. And I'm like, I wrote about people who can see really, really well. Like I wish I could. So, I mean, I'm wearing contact lenses now, but
Mhm.
my prescription is so strong that they don't make this lens in my prescription. So I have a progressive lens that kind of adds to it. So I'm the kid with the Coca-Cola bottle glasses and all that
Okay.
stuff.
I
So,
think that makes the stories that you create a little bit more interesting, because you have to imagine what that perfect sight is like.
mhm,
So it brings in a little bit more of your personal soul work, right?
right, it
I think
does.
that's very awesome.
And one of the things that'll be essential to know in the section I'm going to read is Moniah is a realm that is very much Africa-like. So the land is flat. You can see for a very, very long way. Watchers are accustomed to this. And so they're used to open space and the ability to move around and to see what's coming. And that's one of the things the watchers do. They can read the horizon well. They
Hmm.
know when danger's coming. In the scene that I'm going to read, she has been, due to a prophecy from a watcher, there is danger of a traitor returning, and she has been sent to their allied kingdom of Elwar, which is all mountains and forests and walls and
Oh, so
everything.
her sight is very different there.
Her side is very different. So, and I'm going to share some of that. She's also very well respected because she's a warrior and she's the heir to the throne and she's a princess. And then she goes there and she's not as respected because it's a very different world, but they're
Sure.
still allies. So it's kind of interesting. There's one person who kind of causes her some issues, and you'll pick up on who that is pretty quickly in the section I'll read. But
Excellent. I am super excited to hear you read. I'm really drawn to this series when I first discovered you. I just
great,
thought it would be fun. Excuse me.
no problem. Yeah, I've been fighting something too. So as far as coughing, I get it. And I've got my water to make sure I don't cough on the air. But we will be talking about those giraffes. And I just thought I'd mention real quick. The Watches of Moniah is a 3-book trilogy. The first and second book won the Imagine Best Fantasy Novel in 2021 and 2022. The third book came out the same year as the second book, so obviously it's not going to win the same award, but it was a Palmetto Scribes novel finalist. And there was and I give 5% of my royalties to Giraffe Conservation. The Giraffe Conservation Foundation in Namibia does a lot to save giraffes. A lot of people don't know giraffes are endangered. And because of their work, we now know there are not one species of giraffes, but 4 species of giraffes. And if you combine all 4, there's 117,000 giraffes in the wild right now. That means Diane and I were talking earlier. She loves elephants, and I love elephants
Absolutely.
too.
Yeah.
I love animals, period. Okay. I do matriarchies and clever and unique animals. That's my thing. But there are 4 times more elephants in the wild than there are giraffes. And because we now know there's 4 distinct species, they are being recognized as endangered more so than they were previously, because there's some species that we're talking in the hundreds as opposed to the thousands. So, but
I am
if you,
I'm really excited to hear you read. And I would love to hear more about the giraffes, but my voice is failing me.
no problem.
So
I will be
when you
glad to
are
start
ready,
reading. I will start reading.
that would be fantastic. Thank you.
Okay. All right. So I'm reading from The Watchers of Moniah. That is the book that's right here, first book. And this is actually, we're going to start with Kiffin, who is a prince in Elwar, the kingdom where Adana is going to arrive. So, the kingdom of Elwar. Prince Kiffin of Elwar stared at the history spread out on his desk. Maligon's treacherous war, at least that's how his mother had referred to it. Recent history, but of no interest to many today. The sounds of people gathering in the streets outside the gates of the palace floated up to him. The people were excited to see the watchers enter their city. Many had never laid eyes on the warrior women, and for those who had, it was many years ago. A steward rapped on the door and entered. Prince Kiffin, the Moniahs have arrived in the city. The king and queen request your presence. He nodded without looking at the man. Of course. As he stood and pulled on his thick quilted doublet, his gaze fell on Saren's books, still stacked on the adjoining desk. Kiffin figured he should remove them, but wished someone else would take that final step, an admission to his brother's death. She's here, she's here. His half-sister, Lyra, burst into the room, excitement dancing her across the floor. Come, Kiffin, she's here. He smiled at her and tousled her curly blonde hair, a gift from her father that she had shared with Saren. Lyra scowled and patted her hair in a gesture so like her mother's that Kiffin felt sorrow for the child. Would she grow up to be her mother? Or would their father's kinder nature embed itself in her soul? Go on, Lyra, I'll be along soon. Lyra giggled and ran out of the room. Kiffin felt a stab of irritation when Quilla's sharp reprimand echoed down the hallway. Ladies, do not run. Please act with decorum. Kiffin thought he heard Lyra giggle again. For some reason, her mother's scolding never seemed to faze the girl. Maybe she would come to follow their father's personality after all. People say Kiffin looked like his mother, Queen Rowassa. He managed to dredge up faint memories of her when he tried, but nothing significant. From far below in the city, cheers rang out. He walked from the room. Saren should be here to greet his betrothed. Kiffin remembered a little girl infatuated with giraffes and learning swordplay. 3 years younger than him, he never paid her much attention during his only visit to Moniah. A few years had passed, so he supposed she was a little older now. Maybe all giggles and pouts like Lyra. As he started down the stairs, Saren's last words echoed in his footfalls. Adana, watch, protect. King Danelle met Kiffin in the courtyard's gatehouse. Son, I have a favor to ask of you. His father glanced through the gates as Quilla led Lyra to the raised platform in the waiting arena. I would have asked this of Saren. Tears mist at the man's eyes, and Kiffin fought hard not to comfort his father in front of his subjects. I need you to keep an eye on Adana. You must protect her. She knows nothing of our ways, and Queen Quilla. The king lifted a penetrating blue-eyed gaze toward Kiffin. She might not know how to handle Quilla's sharpness. Watch out for her at all times, son. Kiffin nodded. He would honor Saren's request as well as his father's, no matter how boring and annoying the child might be. The city walls loomed above Adana before she realized it. One moment they were winding along the road, the next they rounded a curve, and there stood the capital city of Elwar, hidden in the hills like she had imagined it. The walls rose high above her. A cleared area ran the length of the fortifications, and her caravan lined up along the walls in preparation to enter the city. As Adana's horse moved forward, she looked to the sky, seeking some distance in sight. Everywhere else, trees, people, hills crowded over her. The sky, a brilliant blue, gave her scant comfort. But at least it was clear today and not overcast, adding another layer of obstruction to her soul. Inside the gates, buildings rose along both sides of the street, 2 and 3 stories high, crammed next to each other. Adana shuddered and fought the urge to reach out and part them, give them room to breathe. Lining the road, villagers gathered 5 and 6 deep, cheering and chanting her name. A little girl reached out to one of the watchers on Adana's right and gave her flowers. The watcher accepted them and passed them up to Adana. Adana inhaled their foreign fragrance and turned to thank the child, but the throngs had absorbed her. Adana nodded her head in the general direction and rode forward. Agony roiled over her as Ambrosia stretched across the link, trying to calm her nerves. A hazy image of the paddock shimmered through the connection, but the effort was too much to hold, and the pain, like a muscle stretched beyond endurance, fogged her senses. She pushed back and ignored the giraffe. It didn't help much. The crystals provided better comfort, but she'd taken them already. Casa rode up on her left side. Breathe, Adana. Make sure you breathe. It won't be so bad when the crowds go home. Adana inhaled and let the air spread through her lungs and into her abdomen. She coughed. The stench of too many people and animals assaulted her. Casa stayed at her side, a knowing look on her face. You will learn to ignore the odors. Find your focus. Breathe. Focus on the action of breathing, not the smells. Adana tried again. She gagged, but forced her mind to center on the swelling in her lungs, followed by the gentle rise and fall of her abdomen. She let the breath rise into her head and held it before releasing it through her lips in a slow, silent breath. Good. Again. Casa talked her through several breaths until her body relaxed and the pain of the stretch link with ambrosia lightened. The castle gate stood open before her and the crowds fell back as her caravan approached the entrance. 2 more breaths should get her there, away from the crowds, but still trapped inside high walls. Breathe. Focus. Breathe. Like a wash of cool water, the shadow of the gate fell across her, and Adana breathed a sigh of relief. The courtyard held a smaller group of nobles, and no one clamoring for attention. Everyone stood in quiet but alert reserve, awaiting her approach. On a raised dais at the end of the courtyard stood the royal family. King Danelle resembled her father in his lighter coloring, but where her father was tall and angular, Danelle had grown portly. He sported a bushy white beard trimmed to just below the chin. As she approached, his face broke into a welcoming grin that helped dissipate some of her fears. She smiled back and turned toward Danelle's wife, Queen Quilla. The petite queen stood beside her husband, the top of her head only reaching his shoulder. She wore her glossy brown hair in an artful arrangement, a centerpiece rising above the small crown perched on her head, while the sides cascade down her cheeks in ringlets. The welcome from King Danelle didn't spread to the queen, who glared at Adana. Prince Kiffin had grown taller than his father since the last time she saw him. The sensation she experienced in the forest when confronted with Hunter's broad shoulders flowed over her. Kiffin hadn't reached the full musculature of a man yet, but his shoulders showed the promise. He wore his brown hair shorter than most men, just long enough to touch his collar, and he regarded her with sad, deep-set brown eyes. Beside him, the young Princess Lyra stood bouncing on her feet. She was a tiny duplicate of her mother, except for the blue eyes and blonde hair given to her by her father. She stood a little farther from Kiffin than she should. The slight gap, proof of a presence gone but not yet acknowledged. Saren's siblings hadn't found a way to stand closer yet. So I have about 6.5 minutes. I'm going to read into the next chapter. Swaths of cloth enveloped Adana's legs as she stumbled along the twisting corridor of the castle. She kicked at the material, unable to feel her legs under all of it. How do they manage? Did you say anything, miss? A startled maid stood, mop in hand. Eyes widening in recognition, she dropped to a quick curtsy. My apologies, Your Highness. I didn't recognize you without your uniform. Me neither, Adana said, unable to escape the snarl in her voice. She kicked at the layers of petticoats and finally reached down and grabbed as many hems as she could and pulled them up. The maid blanched at the sight and turned away. Blazes, Adana said, and dropped the skirts again. It wouldn't do to ruin propriety on her first days in Elwar. She rushed down the passage, kicking her anger out on the thick underskirts each time the material ensnared her legs. After 3 wrong turns, Adana stood before the door to Queen Quilla's torture chamber, known as the small dining room. She took a deep breath and pushed the door open. Kiffin turned toward her, his eyes a mixture of concern and regret. Lyra's blonde head popped up, a look of vicious glee on her face. She slanted her gaze at her mother, whose back straightened, if it was possible to be any straighter. A frown of displeasure darkened the queen's face. Breathe. Adana entered the room, each foot placed with careful precision. I apologize for my tardiness, Queen Quilla. The hall's still... Her skirt swirled in odd directions, catching her off balance. She stumbled and caught herself on the back of the chair closest to her. Kiffin half rose from his seat before Quilla stopped him with a look. Crimson bloomed in splotches along his cheeks, and he returned to his seat, head bowed. Donna watched a muscle flexed in his jaw. Clumsy savage, Quilla said, a sneer stretching across her features. She laid down her fork and studied Adana. I guess it's no wonder. I've heard the horrid details of your uncivilized kingdom. The chair took the pressure Adana squeezed into the wood without complaint. She pushed and shoved the skirts, lifting them just enough to slide around the legs of the supportive chair and settle into its seat. Quilla raised an eyebrow. You plan to break your fast way down there? Several seats separated her from Kiffin and Lyra. It seemed best. Adana picked up the napkin and spread it in her lap with as much decorum as possible. Again, Quilla, I apologize for my tardiness. I'm still learning the twists and turns of your palace. She shrugged, unwilling to show how much the queen's taunts angered her. It's just so different from home. I can help you, Kiffin said, a slight lift to his voice. The crimson seeped higher in his face, but he held her gaze with a friendly smile. Thank you, Adana nodded, and accepted a cup of tea from a servant. The poor woman had waited at first, her face showing confusion on whether to serve Adana at the foot of the table or wait for her to move. When Adana turned back to thank Kiffin, she noticed Quilla studying him, a speculative look on her face. Kiffin stared back, his jaw muscle working harder than before. Queen Quilla sipped her tea. As long as you don't forget your studies, Kiffin. The cup clinked as she placed it in the saucer. As for you, Adana, her scrutiny blazed down the length of the table. You may be informal in Moniah, but here I am Queen Quilla or your highness. Understood? Adana nodded, but fought the urge to smile. Quilla might enjoy lording it over her, but she had already learned little ways to jab back. Of course, your highness. My deepest apologies. Well, now that's settled. I'm afraid you're too late to eat. Come, we have studies. Adana grabbed a biscuit from her plate before the servant swept it away. Unable to keep up, she hitched up the skirts and trotted behind Quilla and Lyra. Their skirts swayed in perfect rhythm to their stride. How would she ever learn to do that? A throat clearing to her left drew her up short. Kiffin stood beside her, an apple in his hand. He tossed it to her, winked, and walked away.
Fantastic. Oh my gosh. I'm hooked.
Yay!
While you were reading, I jumped over to my Amazon page and downloaded your book. So
Yay! Thank you. Thank you so much.
thank you. I'm looking forward to meeting you at the
I am
Creative
too.
Slingers of Ink event in October in South Carolina. I think that's going to be super fun. And then I can pick up your books and get them signed.
Yes, you can.
Always makes me very happy.
Yes, and I will be more than happy to do that for you.
Excellent. So tell me this. What was writing a trilogy or a series of any length really is always a challenge because we need
Yes.
to make those connecting pieces. So what was the biggest challenge for you between book 1 and book 3? To connect the beginning and the end of the trilogy, what was your biggest challenge without giving too much of the story away?
Okay, so here was the thing. I tend to be a pantser. And for those of you who don't know, that means I don't work from a detailed outline. I know where the story's going. I know what's going to happen, but I don't know all these specific details of each scene. That worked great in book 1 and 2. And there's a story between book 1 and 2 actually used to be one book. Long story.
Okay.
I won't go into that
Okay.
right now. It did get split, and I wrote a lot more in book 1 and a lot more in book 2. But book 3, I had not written it when a publisher expressed interest. And he said to me, I'm a small publisher. For me to publish this, I need to see that you've got book 3 done. So I wanted to get it in his time frame, and I sat down and I went through one. Of course, I reread the other 2 books just to refresh my
Sure.
brain.
Yeah.
But
Yeah,
I
we
went
have to do
through
that.
and I figured out, okay, I'm going to have to create an outline here. And so I don't like to do outlines, but I do. It's kind of weird. I am a very structured and organized person and everything else except for this.
You're not the only one. I know lots of authors who operate that way.
So I sat down and it was bare bones. It was basically, okay, where is everybody? Because since it's epic fantasy, you have multiple storylines going on. And by the time we get to book 3, we have people in different places.
Sure.
And different points of view. So I created the outline. And I used that to help me make sure I wanted to be sure there wasn't a story arc left open.
Right.
And I succeeded. So that was good. The funny thing, there was a point where I was working on it and it dawned on me, Queen Quilla, who we just discovered is this lovely, lovely lady.
Yeah, she's fabulous.
She's fabulous. Yes. I had left her out of the outline. So I had to go, wait a minute, where's Quilla?
Oops.
So, but, because I'm tracking Kiffin, I'm tracking Lyra, I'm tracking obviously Adana and Casa, and I'm tracking the people who are in Moniah and the people who are in Elwar. Watchers at War is happening out on the border between those two kingdoms. There's two other kingdoms involved. There's Empress Gabriella from Belwyn, and there is Prince Gerald from Talisha. There's just a lot of different
Yeah,
people
yeah.
that are coming together because it's epic fantasy. And so trying to get all those stories straightened out and figured
So
out who's who.
were you able to wrap everything up? So this is a trilogy. It's
It's
done.
a
There's
complete trilogy.
no
Now,
no
now
possibility for fourth or fifth.
I may at some point write some other stories. For example, the bad guy in the story, the traitor returned, is Maligon. And Maligon has a whole story. And Empress Gabriella of Belwyn is part of his story. So
So
I have toyed.
there's a possibility then for some bridge novellas.
Yeah, there's a possibility of a story that comes before. And
Mhm.
there's a whole story. One of the things you may or may not have picked up on is um, Adana's father, who's not named here, but he's Micah, and Kiffin's father, Danelle, who we did see, the guy with the white beard. They are actually foreigners who traveled south at a young age and were involved in the war that was mentioned at the beginning, Maligon's treacherous war. They were actually quite helpful in saving the kingdoms and stopping Maligon. And so there is this whole world and story that happened with Adana and Kiffin's parents.
So you
And
have a lot of backstory information you could
I
work from.
could, I could go do something. I'm currently actually working on an urban fantasy set in the mountains that's more contemporary.
Okay.
And it's still a matriarchy because it turns out I do matriarchies, but it's got wolves instead. And
Nice.
it's kind of like a Vine Witch meets Discovery of Witches with elements of Red Riding Hood in it.
Oh,
Uh,
that'll be fun.
yeah, so I have that going on. And then if you look over, let me think, this book right here, The Nature of the Beast. This
Hmm.
is my newest book. That's a short story speculative fiction collection. And it's a lot of different stories about beasts. And
Very
you've got
cool.
dragons, you've got shifters, you've got insects, you've got some spooky stuff, you've got a lot of different things in there. And the whole question it asks is, who really is the beast? Because
I like it.
in some cases, the beast is human.
Okay, so
So
you're just gonna have to come back and read some more for me on another program.
glad to. I
That
would
would be
love to.
awesome. I would
Yeah,
love to have you back. You've got two more books in the Watcher series,
right.
and then the two other standalone books. So there's, four more books you can come back and read again. I'd love to have you back.
Absolutely. Absolutely, because most of the time I end up reading from the Watchers of Moniah, but there are scenes in the Watchers in Exile that just make me giggle. It make me so happy when I read them. And the Watchers at War, there are scenes that I've never read to a group that I've thought, I ought
Oh,
to read
well,
that
then
one
you
time.
know what? We're going to have you back to read those seldom read scenes.
That
It's a
sounds good
date.
to me. Sounds good.
Thank you so much for your time today, Barbara. I really, really
Thank you.
appreciate it. And I'm looking forward to seeing you in South Carolina.
I'm looking forward to it too. And thank you so much for having me today.
You're welcome.